Today I am starting with praise, not for kings, not for conquerors, but for the women of Senegal. And you're going to know why very soon. I am Joana, and here we share Africa's untold story and help you heal through storytelling. And it's quite tragic that the world doesn't know half of what these women have achieved. But not to worry, that's why we're here at Bold with Jo. So we're going to be sharing lots of stories. Now, to tell you about one woman who defied an empire, this woman who fought colonial power with no guns, but with God. Her name was Aline Sitoé Diatta. I hope I pronounced that name well, is on the screen. This isn't just a story of rebel. It's a story of a woman who believed that when the land cries, you don't wait for rescue, you become the answer. But who is Aline Sitoé Diatta? Aline was born around 1920 in Casamance, that's Casamance, a place where the ocean meets the forest. She lost her parents when she was very young, and she was raised by her uncle, Elu. She walked with one limb after a childhood illness, which meant she couldn't do like the heavy farm work that other young girls did. But Aline had something else. She didn't just sit around there and pity herself, become the victim of her situation, and whine or do nothing. In her youth, she moved from city to city, first in Tiguinco, then Dakar. There, she worked as a domestic servant in a bustling Medina neighborhood and lived with her partner. Now she's already grown, she has a partner, Thomas Diatta, a dock worker. They had one daughter, Senegal. All these names, they were so beautiful and rich. I just hope I'm actually pronouncing them a bit correct to what it is. So far, her life seemed pretty normal, nothing spectacular, right? Things will begin to change very soon. In 1941, something happened that changed everything. While she was working in Dakar, Aline began having visions, like real visions. So she said that these visions came from a Mitai, the supreme being in Jola belief, a divine message ordering her to return home and build a sacred shrine. So she packed up her little girl, her daughter, and they left the city. She simply went home to obey that call. When she reached Cabrals, she didn't say a word about her vision at first, but in May around 1942, she gathered the village elders and performed a sacred ritual called Kasila. She told them to sacrifice a black bull. They did it, and then rain came because they were experiencing drought. After years of drought, the skies opened. For 6 weeks, they sang songs, they celebrated, feasts, dancing. People came from afar and wide to see this woman who could call the sky and make the clouds cry, like clouds to make the loud boom again and the falling sounds of rain. That was like a life-changing experience for the people there, because you know, if there's drought, there's famine and so on. Now, around this time, Aline married a local religious leader, Aloy Diatta. You know, when we were researching, I was like, first husband was Diatta, our second husband, we researched just like 10 times and we're still the same thing. I'm like, okay, so maybe more people are called Diatta in Senegal. Let me know if you're Senegalese and you know this. Write it beneath. So she married him, becoming his second wife in a polygamous union. Yes, you heard me right. This union sealed their place as both spiritual and community figure. God, it's going to be terrible when you hear what happened later. As her influence grew, you know, her spiritual influence grew, Aline Sitoé's teaching increasingly conflicted with Vichy France's agricultural policy. While French administrators had previously relied on imports from French Indochina to satisfy demand for rice, and in the Dakar region, they were unable to do so after the Japanese invasion. So, you know, there's war in another place now. You see how things are happening in global space affect your local space. France was in chaos during World War II. The Vichy regime couldn't import rice anymore, so they forced Senegalese farmers to grow rice for export and peanuts for profits. But, you know, Aline, she wasn't having that. Aline Sitoé Diatta began her campaign alongside other market women. So these grassroots movements, sometimes they have power, you know, to put the fire on the ground. She encouraged the population to refuse cooperation with the French, to stop paying taxes, to reject calls to replace rice cultivation with peanut. Why? Aline Sitoé Diatta also called for the reinstatement of better working conditions and right to religious worship. So all they needed in their own space, in their own land, was just the right to exist. In essence, all she was telling the people was to stand firm, to reject colonial orders, to work on themselves, and to honor the ancestors once again. Her message spread like wildfire. Women left and right from the market, they joined her. Men stopped delivering rice to the colonial depot. To the French, you understand what is happening now? This is rebellion. Everything is rebellion. You want your own rights in your own country, in your own land. This is rebellion. But Aline, it was an act of obedience to the divine authority that she felt was talking to her, was calling her. So linking regional droughts to French colonial labor and tax policies, she prophesied the collapse of the French. She warned that French rule will fall, that their taxes and soldiers will crumble, that the land will be free again. That was what she was preaching. As a result, pilgrims began pouring into Cabrals, drawn by her voice. Local leaders who had benefited from colonial rule were also alarmed by her growing influence. So you know, this is something that's always important that we have to remember. Colonial rule was possible also because there were people, local rulers on ground, that did not open their eyes, that were greedy, that needed foreign validation. Do you see this kind of thing still happening today? Anyway, in June 1942, George Reyes, the colonial governor of Senegal, ordered the region circle commander to monitor Aline's activity, authorizing for her arrest and expulsion from the region if necessary. So he wanted them to arrest her. What will happen if all these fake Pentecostal pastors are preaching the kingdom of God is in heaven? What if they start preaching the kingdom of God is on earth? The kingdom of God is in your backyard, under your soil. Lithium is there. That is the kingdom of God. Oh, please safeguard it. Safeguard those trees. Safeguard your environment. Safeguard your nature. Anybody coming to bulldoze out those trees, anybody coming to exploit you, exploit your earth, protest. Be loud. Don't sit down. What if all these Pentecostal pastors start preaching that? And the donations, the offerings they are collecting, they use it to, mobilize the people, protect the earth and the environment around them. What if? Anyway, let me come back. Why am I always digressing? I'm enjoying this story. Let me come back. In January 1943, French authorities sent military detachments into Casamance to enforce their rice seizures. Now, residents of several villages in the Osoye region refused to give up their rice. Now, let's still remember, this is not the soil of French. This is not French soil. This was Africa. In the village of Ayone, a group of hundreds of armed Jola from the nearby villages of Efok and Yautu fired shots at one of the soldiers. The same day, a group of men from Efok attacked a French medical unit, convinced that they were covertly gathering information for colonial tax enforcement. And soon, what will happen? You know the rest. Maybe I can even end the story here because you know what will happen. The attention turned directly to Aline. A detachment set out to arrest Aline Sitoé. After reaching the area at night, one of their guards thought they saw Aline Sitoé attempting to escape, leading them to shoot and kill a woman who turned out to be her co-wife. To prevent further violence, Aline Sitoé, who had been in seclusion while menstruating, appeared the next morning. She was beaten, arrested, and dragged away, along with her husband and 17 others. Remember at the beginning when I told you this religious union is going to be very, 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 very funny, very soon. It's getting there. All of her bruises rice was seized and she was taken into Tigoinko and placed in solitary confinement. This is someone who lived an ordinary life, a domestic worker, a woman at home, now facing so many problems with French army just because she had the words, she had the insight and the inspiration to motivate her people to protect their land. Does not stop there. One arrestee claimed that Aline Sitoé had told him not to give his rice, not to allow his children to be conscripted, and not to pay taxes. You see, when fire is getting hot, people like to throw other people under the bus now. You know that, right? As if that weren't enough. Her own husband, now you see where I'm saying is going to be interesting, her husband that she married, that he claimed he had been forced to marry Aline Sitoé because of her stature as a religious leader and her spirit shrine. He's arrested, so he has to find his way to come out, right? So that's why he's like, they forced me to marry her. I didn't want to marry her. Okay. Anyway, this was contradicted by the people in Cabruse, who stated that Alou Gaye had willingly married Aline Sitoé. Maybe it was even her religious status that made him be like, oh my God, I'm going to marry this woman. So was he lying, or was it just out of fear? Let me know what you think. Well, that aside, let's go back to the story and end it, John. What was happening at Aline's own end? During Aline Sitoé's interrogation, she stated that she was sent by God, who appeared to her several times. So she was like, I was sent by God, who appeared to me several times, and that she only transmitted the directive that God dictated to her. That was what she said. She even promised that if she is going to be freed, she would no longer say one word against the whites. And if you really look into it, she was right. She didn't need to speak anymore. Her message had spread already like fire beyond her own reach. Aline was tried under the French native code. They called her a threat to colonial order. I'm sure this is where they call her a terrorist, a preacher of rebellion. She was accused of leading a campaign to make the people of the Usoye region disobey colonial authorities, destabilizing the colony and inciting a rebellion against the colonial government. That was the accusation. In her defense, she stated that she was a divine messenger just transmitting directives from God. She denied any role in instigating a revolt, which is actually true. She further stated that her mission was apolitical and not aimed at instigating any resistance, which is true. She's like, no, cultivate the soil, rely on your ancestors. This is what it's apolitical, right? Despite this, she was sentenced to exile and imprisoned in the city of Kayes. Then that was part of French Sudan. Many of her associates received lesser sentences after claiming that they were only following the teachings of Aline Sitoé, whom they considered a divine messenger. After being sent to Kayes, Aline Sitoé was transferred to a concentration camp in Timbuktu, where, as a result of the lack of fruit or vegetables provided to prisoners, she died of scurvy on the 22nd of May 1944. Today, Aline Sitoé Diatta is remembered as the Joan of Arc of Senegal. Joan of Arc is said to have heard many voices from God telling her to lead France to victory. So, Joan also led French troops against the English during the 100-Year Wars, right? So she was captured, tied, and executed by burning. So part of their stories share similarities. Aline was a woman who stood up to an empire with nothing but just her visions, her faith, her courage. Today, her name lives on, not just as a memory, but a reminder of what faith can ignite, especially when used in the service of the people. I am Joan. Joadre, and that was Africa's Untold Stories.